first half is really going to be external. How do I fit in here? How do I make a living?
Yep.
Once that's good enough, and if you get hit by something like some of these experiences Chris talked about, then the turn is just going to start to go inward. What gives me a strong sense of self? Kind of what's going on inside of me? What are these energies that are working in me? And paying more and more attention to that.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain: to find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of More Than One Way. We're glad to have you with us. Thom, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
It's been a nice day today.
It is. It's beautiful outside.
Yeah.
We're going to do something a little different with this episode. If you were with us on our last episode, we had a great conversation with our guest, Chris Chase. And we're going to continue to do some interviews like that. And then following those interviews, we're going to take some time to kind of recap the conversation and talk a little bit about what those conversations brought up in us, what questions or what things really stood out to us that we felt like, hey, we want to take some time to go back and expand that a little bit or talk a little bit more about that. But it's certainly not a requirement that you have listened to that episode before you enjoy the discussion that we're going to have today. So we'd love for you to do that. If you'd like to go back, it's available for you there. But it's definitely not something that you need to have done before you enjoy today's discussion.
There was just so much in it. So
there really was. I'm glad that we had the time with him and to hear his story and for him to share vulnerably about his journey from childhood through and kind of where that's led him, just brought up a lot of things.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. And especially within the spiritual realm, the idea of the first and second half of life, which is I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but if you do any kind of spiritual reading or people talk about it quite a bit, and while it's never clear cut, it is kind of a way to talk about how at different points in your life, different things are important. And some of what Chris was talking about got me thinking about that anyway.
About the first and second half of life?
Yeah. Like in particular, like one of the things was he talked about when his mother got sick, got cancer when I think he was 13. Well, right there, that's going to start to generate some questions. Oftentimes, most people who are 13 don't really necessarily think about. But part of his, prior to that 13, part of his upbringing within the religious world, within the church, was kind of doing the fairly regular, typical church thing. Mm-hmm. And that's all kind of first half of life stuff. The first half of life is really about structure, identity, belonging, building a sense of self, finding your place in the world. And within the spiritual and religious communities, that can be seen kind of in things like creeds and beliefs and practices like acolyting. Yeah. All right. So he talked about that, and that all those formal things that you might do in a religious service that are part of the first half of life, part of kind of building you up, giving you a sense of what you believe, giving you a sense of who you are, where you belong, and all that kind of stuff. And then at 13, I would imagine that got challenged a bit with that diagnosis. But still, you're 13, so the hope is you're still trying to build all that within your life,
right?
And I think for him, it seemed to come to a head when he started the idea of bargaining with God. Remember, he talked about that?
I do, yeah.
Right, and God, I sure can relate to that.
Oh my goodness!
And sometimes I still do that.
Yeah.
If you do this, I'll do that. I promise.
So
mine.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Or he had shared the idea of just with God, with the idea that if you'll heal my mom, then I will become a priest.
Right. I'll become an Episcopal priest. Right. So good bargain. Right. Right. Mine wasn't even quite as nice as that. Mine was more like, God, if I could just win the lottery, then I'll,
Everything
I promise I'll share it with people who really
Yeah.
need it, but I really need to win it,
Yeah,
that kind of deal making thing.
Sure.
And once again, I think that's a reflection of the first half of life thing.
Yeah.
You do this, I'll do that. God's this way, and if I'm just good enough, then maybe God will give me what I want. And that's perfectly natural and normal, I think, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's what that bargain got me thinking about. A natural, normal part of a spiritual journey is finding yourself in that place of where the dominant way you relate to God is through this kind of bargaining. You do this, I'll do that. You do this, I'll do that.
And you think about even historically back through different cultures and religions, I mean, that was very much a part of the sacrifice, and the different things that were happening there were kind of appeasing, or if we do this, then God will protect or provide, or however. Yeah.
And all those things are great until they're not great anymore, right? Until it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? Until you realize, no matter how many times I go to church, no matter how much I do for the church, no matter things that are going to be difficult in my life will still happen. I can send my kids to youth group with the hope that, God, this will inoculate them from all the difficulties of life.
Yeah.
And then find out that's not true. And then with Chris, his mom did die.
Yes.
And yet he still became an Episcopal priest, right?
Right.
So to me, that's going to open the doorway, like a catalyst to open the doorway into what I mentioned as the second half of life, which is much less worried about like structure and belonging, and it's way more about like transcending and deepening and going inward to find kind of the unity and the breadth of life, and rather than like believing in God or trying to bargain, it's more opening up to this presence of God and finding an experience, finding a presence.
Much more uncertainty.
Yeah, much more uncertainty and way less transactional. Right? So once again, I'm going to come back to, it's not good or bad. It's just different things have meaning and give us a sense of what life is about at different points in times in our life. And it's not necessarily chronological.
Right.
Though sometimes it can be, and sometimes you can see in life people who are in what we call a midlife crisis. That in the spiritual world would be that movement from first to second.
The transition time. Yeah.
Because it is a big transition. And usually the transitions happens when the answers that satisfy us in the first half are starting to not satisfy us so much.
Fall apart a little bit.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah. I think, I think in thinking just through the kind of life transition periods, I think there are times that almost lend themselves more a little bit to that first half, whether it's a transition out of school or a new job or a new marriage, new family. I mean, just all of those things that are a part of our growth individually and as community.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so, I don't know if focus is the right word, but we're just in the midst of that so much that it's hard to find the time or the opportunities for some of those second half practices.
Yeah, it is.
Experiences.
And life can be extremely demanding. So it's once again, it's not like it's clean.
Right.
The ideal is you've done all you wanted to do in your first half of life. You've accomplished all that you've wanted to accomplish. You are financially secure. Then, right? Then it's time to go. But that doesn't always happen quite that cleanly, right?
Yeah, it's not like you say, okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah, right. Now I'm ready.
I will be making the transition.
Yeah. Because I was thinking about that for my own life, and like this second half of life questions about like, what, not just do I believe in God, but what is the nature of God, and how do I connect with this, and who am I really, and do I really think the way that my culture is telling me that I'm supposed to think, and all that kind of stuff. Those questions hit me at a pretty young age, and I was trying to figure out why in the world. For Chris, it was a huge crisis.
Sure.
And for me, it was just as huge a crisis, but in a different way. And I guess the way I'm going to talk about it is, my culture told me that boys were one way and girls were another way. Boys are like this, girls are like that, right? And it was a pretty clean, clear cut as to how that was. But my experience was, I never fit in the category of my gender.
In the way that it was defined.
Yeah, in the way it was defined. So this is what a boy's supposed to be like. This is, then therefore this is what a man is supposed to be like. And I think primarily it's because, at least what I internalized was, you're not supposed to feel anything if you're a man.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? You're supposed to kind of rise above it, not let feelings are inferior to thinking. You're not, and I was just a massive feeler, and still am. Right? Yeah. That massive feeler, what some people might call extremely sensitive. And so here I am, this extremely sensitive boy, trying to then become a man, and being told over and over again, that's wrong.
Yeah. That's
wrong. You're not supposed to be like that. That's wrong. That's wrong. And so I think that was my crisis. To say, I can't just go along with the cultural ideal, because that's, once again, that's part of the first half of life, and it's not bad. The culture tries to help say, if you go to school and then get good grades, and go to high school and get good grades, and then go to college and get good grades, you're going to get a good job.
A good job, which will pay you enough to be able to take the next step.
So, okay. And I just couldn't follow that path. It just wasn't working. Because I was trying so much to figure out, okay, well, but I'm not what it is you're saying that I am, or that I'm supposed to be. And so what do I do with that? Right? And so that oftentimes veered me off the cultural path, which sometimes I wish it didn't.
Yeah, it can be lonely.
Yeah. And also, there's a reason to go through that path. It gives you options, and gives you choices, and it's a good thing to get good grades and get a good job and do all that. It's just, since I never did that really well, I found myself, yes, lonely, but at the same time asking these other kind of questions that didn't really have oftentimes anything to do with, So I went to seminary very, very young. I went to seminary in my early 20s.
Okay.
Searching for the answers to some of these questions about not just who I am, but what does it mean when we say God? That's why I'm so, sometimes I feel like obsessed with asking people, well, what do you mean when you say God?
Right.
And that's why. Because it's been with me for such a long time. And so Chris's thing, once again, it just really got me thinking about anybody who's on this spiritual journey, and I think we all are in our own ways. It can be very helpful to know where you are on that. Not like first, second half, but to some degree, am I still more concerned with forming my identity and structure and belonging and beliefs? Or am I at that place where I'm going to branch out into something else?
And I think, just in talking about this, you had mentioned just the importance of that first half.
It's so important.
The foundation to be able to move to that second half, that it's part of that shaping.
The way some people put it is, the first half of life is about building a container, and the second half of life is about getting to know the contents of that container. So what's inside you? What's going on? Right?
Okay.
But the stronger the container is, the more you can hold.
Yeah.
So it's very important. And I think, for me, with the conversation with Chris, we could see some of that movement into the second half of life stuff with his experience at that church.
At the church,
yeah. Which isn't hey, let's build your structure kind of experience.
Right.
You know, right? The way he talked about everything collapsing in, and the idea that God's presence is, the way I'm going to put it, with us and in us and all around us, right here in matter. It's not, right? So that's going to be a very, very different way to approach God than just through, this is what I believe, through a creed.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's put it that way.
And he was talking, I mean, he was in a time, he was in school studying at that time when that happened, and kind of finding different wisdom and influences that were kind of shaping his thoughts around what that meant and what it meant to be connected to more, what that search was about.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I think that, that definitely speaks to those clues of the second half, I think, with the idea of the openness to the idea that maybe there's wisdom and truth from multiple places versus just one. Where in that first half, sometimes it feels like it's about the answers and kind of finding out the correct way. Where the second half, whether it's by choice or by destruction, kind of breaks that down. With the idea of walking into it with an uncertainty of, I'm going to be okay with questions, and I'm going to be okay with where that might lead me, instead of feeling like, or being told, you're going down the wrong path, or you're leading yourself astray. It's no, I'm walking into the openness. With the idea that the openness is there's something to learn there.
And the way he walked into that openness and was with some help. So it's actual people, but then people who've written books and people, which to me, once again, says that this journey and this that has been going on forever. And it's going way back, and people can help us along the way through things that they've written, through people that we meet, through stuff like that.
I had a great mentor when I was early in my church work who was very seasoned and was very patient with me as I kind of fumbled around and tried things and failed a lot. And she would let me do that, would let me fail, and then talk to me afterwards about, hey, why do you think that happened? What do you think? What did that feel like to you? What do you think it felt like to the people you were leading and you were with? How would you want that to feel differently? And just to have somebody take the time to have those conversations in a time that I had a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but I had very little wisdom, and very little understanding of the people that I was working with, and so it was really nice to have somebody in that second half, as I was kind of finding my way through the first half to the second half, to be able to plant some of those seeds, I guess. That I could kind of watch grow or feel grow, kind of break their way through the ground to see something different.
Right.
But if I'd been on my own, I would have dealt with a lot of sense of failure, and that would have led to a lot of just feeling not worthy and I can't do this.
Right.
So.
Well, that's I think you bring up a really important thing, and that is, oftentimes when you enter into the second half of life, obviously especially if it's through some tragedy like what Chris was dealing with, or to some degree what I was dealing with, it can feel like you're just on your own. But but the truth is, yes, you meet people who have done it and are continuing to do it in their way, and they can be very, very, almost like lifelines.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt about it. I think the people I've worked with, in particular, doing dream work and things like that, have been like that for me, right? But I also saw within Chris's thing, with his example of people who go to went to Muir Woods. Remember that?
Oh, I love that story.
Yeah. You want to remind everybody?
He was talking about a particular spot in Muir Woods that's been dubbed the cathedral, that is just intentionally a place where, suggested to turn off phones and just kind of be present, and just talking about the feeling of that place, just in the quiet, but also in the surrounding, in nature with other people in that setting, and it just being a very sacred site because of that.
And that kind of an experience for me would be, once again, a perfect example of what I'm talking about with the second half of life stuff. That would be more like a second half of life. There's not giving you any answers. Nobody's telling you what you should or shouldn't do. You come in and just, it's pure experience.
Experiential, yeah.
Pure experience. And each one is having, each person I'm going to just imagine is having their own experience. And that's good.
But there's something about each person having their own experience together.
Yeah.
That's pretty magical.
It is. There's no doubt about it. And then if you so choose, you could talk about it. Maybe not in that setting because that didn't seem to be what it is. But that kind of an experience, that kind of a happening is what I mean, and I think what people who've written about the second half of life mean when they say the difference between the first half kind of being about almost like finding answers to the second half being just more open to experience. Not that they can't go together.
Sure.
Because they do go together in their own way. Right? So that was just a very powerful, and I think that whole thread from bargaining to finding out that the bargain didn't work, but yet still going in that direction, finding having the experience within the context of that church, to then moving into this Muir Woods experience is just a great timeline almost of moving from the first to the second half of life, right? And the thing about it is, even with all those experiences and with all that stuff that could be seen as second half of life, you're still having to function in the world.
Right.
You still have to have a job. You're still married. You're still trying to help your kids. Right. So, like I said, it's not one without the other, really.
Right. So how do you navigate both?
Yeah. Right. Right. I mean, for me, I think that's the thing about just really paying attention to yourself and what's coming up for you. The guy I work with often just says, "Well, what's working you? What just keeps coming into your mind? What just keeps popping up? Or do you keep just getting drawn?" And that'll give you a sense of it. And he's always, for me, someone who's saying, trust that.
Nice.
Trust it and pay attention to it. Right. So that's how, one way anyway. Right. And that'll give you, for me, it just always gives me a sense of maybe what I'm going to start to read.
Yeah.
Or some retreat I could go on, or some person I'm drawn to, that kind of thing.
So in that way, it's connectional toward that pull or that instinct or that thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, because I think the initial pull, at least the way people write about it for this second half of life stuff, is going to be internal. I mean, it's going to pull you
inward.
The first half is really going to be external. It's really going to be, how do I fit in here? How do I make a living?
Yeah.
How do I help my kid?
Sure.
How do I buy a house? All those kind of things. But once that's good enough, oftentimes, and like I said, it's never clean. And if you get hit by something like some of these experiences Chris talked about, then the turn is just going to start to go inward. And you're going to see, instead of what gives me a strong sense of self, kind of what's going on inside of me. What are these things happening inside of me? What are these energies that are working in me? And paying more and more attention to that. And that takes time. Yeah. And that takes courage.
Yeah, I think one of the statements looking at it was talking about the idea of the first half being something where there's a building of that container.
Yeah.
And then the second half talking about discovering what's inside of it. And I like that contrast between the building and the discovering,
Yeah.
because the discovering it doesn't imply that you choose it or that you shop for
Right.
it or you plan it and you make a list. It's
Right.
more you uncover it.
Yeah.
So it's something more that kind of implies that it's there, but it just has to be seen or understood.
Yeah. So if I were to take that into my own life, so I spent a long time trying to cram down feelings and almost pretend like I didn't have them. Sometimes self-medicate.
Yeah.
Alcohol, weed, anything like that just really kind of could put me in a place where I wasn't feeling so intensely. Right? And now, while it's still hard, I welcome it more.
Yeah.
And then that's by going in, I can sit with, well, what are those feelings? What are they? And one of the things that, growing up within the Christian tradition, I think I've mentioned this before, I never thought I was allowed to be angry.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So that's not an acceptable feeling. Right. That's not an acceptable. But now I'm just more inclined to be angry, but not let it dominate me. And I could see the reason why people were saying it, because you don't want to just fly off the handle in a rage. Yeah.
Right. But feeling it is different.
Yeah. Feeling it is different, and recognizing it's here for a reason.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the difference between, first half, that's not appropriate. Second half was, okay, why is this here? Not to just let it do whatever it is it wants, like me be angry, so that gives me the right to go out and throw a rock through somebody's car. Obviously not. But the answer isn't pretend like I'm not angry.
Yeah.
So to me, it's you go inside and sometimes you find things that you thought you weren't supposed to have, and there they are.
Yeah.
Right?
I think hearing your story and talking about the feelings, for me, it was my imagination was so strong that I would just get lost in my head. And I remember being told multiple times as a kid, get out of your head, get out of your head. And my family being so frustrated with me because they would ask me to do something and I would go to do it, but then I would get lost in a story or daydreaming and just be off somewhere else. And just, and that being such a core of who I was, but feeling like that was out of place because it just got me in trouble, or it got me behind, or it got me not paying attention, whatever, and then coming into the idea of that being such a source for me of creativity and connection. And I love stories and just all these things from that, but struggling with the idea of it being something I felt like I had to compensate for rather than something I felt like I could lean into or unleash.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Right. So I think all these things are what our conversation with Chris got me thinking about.
Yeah.
It sounds like you as well.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And I think anytime you hear someone else's journey, it causes you to think about your own.
Yeah.
Or to think about those people around you, or just where you've had those moments where there's been a real transition, or there's been an experience or something where you can look back and say, okay, I might categorize that as a first half of life season.
Yeah.
Or I might categorize that as a moment where I was definitely in transition and I was feeling that tension and trying to make sense of what do I do with feeling this way when I've thought this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are just great questions, and they just help us along the way when we ask stuff like that. And the thing that what you talked about makes me think of is, oftentimes the very thing that we think we should cram down becomes the center of kind of our own creativity, and in many ways our own way forward. And life is like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of entering into this second half stuff. So we're framing a lot of our chat here around the first and second half of life thing, and I think it's because I think it's a great tool.
Yeah.
But there's not one better than the other. It's not a matter of this is worse. You know, like
Yeah.
if you're in the first half of life and the idea of building and following a particular creed or following a particular way of life is working for you, and you never get any of these questions that we've talked about that have, in a sense, move us into the second half, that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, God bless you. That's good for you. You know, and it's not a race. It's not a competition. It's just a way to think about why within the spiritual realm, why some people can get so concerned with, hey, I'm an Episcopalian and Episcopalians have it right. Okay, that's going to be almost, obviously you could say like a first half of life thing.
Right.
And for that person, that's true.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I grew up in the Episcopal Church and I reached a point where I thought, well, the Episcopal Church is great and all, but I don't necessarily identify myself with just that. I just see it as a tool that helps me with these other things that I've been dealing with in my life, and that is deepening my experience with this mystery we call God, finding more about my own inner nature and all that. So I might not necessarily, in a sense, agree with that person in the first half of life, but that doesn't make that person less.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And like I said, and it's never clean. It's not a matter of
what age you are, or
I mean, like I said with Chris, and to some degree with me, you'll have to speak to yourself. This stuff can happen really early, and especially if you go through real difficult, if not traumatizing things. Because then the normal way of being that the culture kind of sets up for us gets challenged pretty early.
Yeah, it gets shaky.
Yeah. And in the spiritual life, one of the things that can get challenged pretty early is, once again, if I'm just a good Episcopalian, right, and I go to church on Sunday, great thing. I can expect that my life will just be just the way I want it to be.
Yeah.
Right. Now that's obviously an extreme.
Right.
But it's within that realm of, this is what we believe. This is what my group is all about. And I find security in that.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that in moving to a second half of life that you abandon the first half. It's not like that identity, you throw it away with the idea of now I'm this. You know, that shaped how
all
you got
way
to where you are. That's part of your journey.
No doubt. And this, to me, in that the second half enhances that first half. It doesn't. It doesn't
looking
throw
back.
it out. Yeah. It doesn't throw it out. I think there's just sometimes in human nature we use it as I can fall into a competition, or I can fall into this is good and this isn't good. This is better. This is worse.
We judge things so quickly.
Yeah. And
especially people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially ourselves too.
Yeah. True.
So it's not, this kind of a tool isn't to judge, it's to try to help us see, give us some sense of an awareness.
And I think coming back to Chris's story, he talked about several times seeing God more fully.
Yeah.
And that experience, the experiences that he had leading him toward seeing God in a deeper way, or the divine, you know.
Yeah, and the thing is with that is that will go on forever.
Yeah, right.
If God is what I would say this infinite mystery, then it's gonna keep unfolding. Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you, and take care.